Honestly, this trend is so fucking stupid. Hello, my beautiful phantom friends, and welcome to me jumping once again on another bandwagon. So, something that tends to be all the rage nowadays, seems to be turning pretty much anything and everything into ASMR. And let me tell you, they can get really strange and honestly just absurd, and I question whether or not people actually know what ASMR is. It's not just meant to be making a bunch of random noises or talking quietly. It's a very actual, like, precise thing that I don't think people quite understand. So we just got bitches licking cameras and even probably weirder shit out there on the YouTubes. So today, in my best attempt possible, I am going to be providing some Phantom of the Opera ASMR. Now, you might be asking yourself, how does one create Phantom of the Opera ASMR? Well, my friends, I am here to tell you that I will be putting my old competitive storytelling skills to use today and be reading to you in the most ASMR voice possible the prologue of Gaston Leroux's original novel. I did, in high school, win first place in the OSSAA prose competition, reading none other than Susan Kay's Phantom novel. So, I don't know, I'm still pretty proud of that. So we'll see if I still have my shit together in that sense. Also, my French viewers and anyone who speaks French, some of these names and words I'm probably gonna fuck up really badly. I took 2 semesters of French and was very bad at it. Anyway, Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Prologue, in which the author of this singular work informs the reader how he acquired the certainty that the opera ghost really existed. The opera ghost really existed. He was not, as was long believed, a creature of the imagination of the artists, the superstition of the managers, or a product of the absurd and impressionable brains of the young ladies of the ballet, their mothers, the box keepers, the cloakroom attendants, or the concierge. Yes, he existed in flesh and blood, although he assumed the complete appearance of a real phantom, that is to say, of a spectral shade. When I began to ransack the archives of the National Academy of Music, I was at once struck by the surprising coincidences between the phenomena ascribed to the ghost and the most extraordinary and fantastic tragedy that excited the Paris upper classes. And I soon conceived the idea that this tragedy might be reasonably explained by the phenomena in question. The events do not date more than 30 years back, and it would not be difficult to find, at the present day, in the foyer of the ballet, old men of the highest respectability, men upon whose word one could absolutely rely, who would remember as though they happened yesterday the mysterious and dramatic conditions that attended the kidnapping of Christine Daae, the disappearance of the Vicomte de Chagny, and the death of his older brother, Count Philippe, whose body was found on the bank of the lake that exists in the lower cellars of the opera on the Rue Scribe side. But none of those witnesses had until that day thought that there was any reason for connecting the more or less legendary figure of the opera ghost with that terrible story. The truth was slow to enter my mind, puzzled by an inquiry that at every moment was complicated by events which, at first sight, might be looked upon as superhuman, and more than once I was within an ace of abandoning my task in which I was exhausting myself in the hopeless pursuit of a vain image. At last I received the proof that my presentiments had not deceived me, and I was rewarded for all of my efforts on the day that I acquired the certainty that the opera ghost was more than a mere shade. On that day I had spent long hours over the Memoirs of a Manager, the light and frivolous work of the too sceptical Moncharmin, who, during his term at the opera, understood nothing of the mysterious behavior of the ghost, who was making all the fun of it that he could, at the very moment he became the first victim of the curious financial operation that went inside the magic envelope. I had just left the library in despair when I met a delightful acting manager of our National Academy, who stood chatting on a landing with a lively, well-groomed little man to whom he introduced me gaily. The acting manager knew about my investigations and how eagerly and unsuccessfully I had been trying to discover the whereabouts of the examining magistrate in the famous Chagny case, Monsieur Fourier. Nobody knew what had become of him, alive or dead, and here he was, back from Canada, where he had spent 15 years, and the first thing he had done on his return to Paris was to come to the secretarial offices at the opera and ask for a free seat. The little old man was Monsieur Fourier himself. We spent a good part of the evening together, and he told me the whole Chagny case as he had understood it at the time. He was bound to conclude in the favor of the madness of the Viscount and the accidental death of his elder brother, for lack of evidence to the contrary. But he was nevertheless persuaded that a terrible tragedy had taken place between the two brothers in connection with Christine Daae. He could not tell me what had become of Christine or the Viscount. When I mentioned the ghost, he only laughed. He, too, had been told of curious manifestations that seemed to point to the existence of an abnormal being residing in one of the most mysterious corners of the opera, and he knew the story of the envelope, but he had never seen anything worthy of his attention as magistrate in charge of the Chagny case, and it was much as he had done to listen to the evidence of a witness who appeared of his own accord, and declared that he had often met the ghost. This witness was none other than the man whom all of Paris called the Persian, and who was well known to every subscriber of the opera. The magistrate took him for a visionary. I was immensely interested in the story of the Persian. I wanted, if there was still some time, to find this valuable and eccentric witness. My luck had begun to improve, and I discovered him in his little flat on the Rue de Rivoli, where he lived ever since, and where he died 5 months after my visit. I was first inclined to be suspicious, but when the Persian had told me with childlike candor that all that he knew about the ghost, and had handed me proofs of the ghost's existence, including the strange correspondence of Christine Daae, to do as I pleased with, I was no longer able to doubt. No, the ghost was not a myth. I have, I know, been told that this correspondence may have been forged, from first to last, by a man whose imagination had certainly been fed on the most seductive tales, but fortunately I discovered some of Christine's writing outside of the famous bundle of letters. On a comparison between the two, all of my doubts were removed. I also went into the past history of the Persian and found that he was an upright man, incapable of inventing a story that might have defeated the ends of justice. This, moreover, was the opinion of the more serious people who, at one time or other, were mixed up in the Chagny case, who were friends of the Chagny family, to whom I showed all of my documents and set forth all of my inferences. In this connection, I should like to print a few lines from which I received from General D. Sir, I cannot urge you too strongly to publish the results of your inquiry. I remember perfectly that, a few weeks before the disappearance of the great singer Christine Daae, and the tragedy which threw the whole of Faubourg Saint-Germain into mourning, there was a great deal of talk in the foyer of the ballet on the subject of the ghost, and I believe that it only ceased to be discussed in consequence of the later affair that excited us all so greatly. But if it be possible, as, after hearing you, I believe, to explain the tragedy through the ghost, I beg you, sir, to talk to us about the ghost again. Mysterious though the ghost may at first appear, he will always be more easily explained than the dismal story in which malevolent people have tried to picture the two brothers killing each other, who had worshipped each other all of their lives. Believe me, etc. Lastly, with my bundle of papers in hand, I once more went to the ghost's vast domain, a huge building which he had made his kingdom. All that my eyes saw, all that my mind perceived, corroborated the Persian's documents precisely, and a wonderful discovery crowned my labours in a very definite fashion. It will be remembered later that, when digging in the substructure of the opera, before burying the phonographic records of the artist's voice, the workmen laid bare a corpse. Well, I was at once able to prove that the corpse was that of the opera ghost. I made the acting manager put this proof to the test with his own hand, and it was now a matter of supreme indifference to me if the papers pretend that the body was a victim of the Commune. The wretches who were massacred under the Commune in the cellars of the opera were not buried on this side. I will tell whether skeletons can be found in the spot not very far from that immense crypt, which was stocked during the siege with all sorts of provisions. I came upon this task just when I was looking for the remains of the opera ghost, which I should never have discovered but for the unheard-of chance described above. But we will return to the corpse and what ought to be done with it. For the present, I must conclude this very necessary introduction by thanking Monsieur Mifois, who was the commissary of police called in for the first investigations after the disappearance of Christine Daae, Monsieur Remy, the late secretary, Monsieur Mercier, the late acting manager, Monsieur Gabriel, the late chorus master, and more particularly Madame la Baronne de Castellan-Barbezac, who was once the little Meg of the story, and who is not ashamed of it, the most charming star of our admirable corps de ballet, the eldest daughter of the worthy Madame Giry, now deceased, who had charge of the ghost's private box. All of these were great assistants to me, and, thanks to them, I shall be able to reproduce those hours of sheer love and terror in their smallest details before the reader's eyes. And I should be ungrateful indeed if I omitted, while standing on the threshold of this dreadful and vicarious story, to thank the present management of the opera, which has so kindly assisted me in all of my inquiries, Monsieur Messager in particular, together with Monsieur Gabion, the acting manager, and that of most amiable men, the architect entrusted with the preservation of the building, who did not hesitate to lend me the works of Charles Garnier, although he was almost sure that I would never return them to him. Lastly, I must pay a particular tribute to the generosity of my friend and former collaborator, Monsieur J. Le Croze, who allowed me to dip into his splendid theatrical library and to borrow the rarest editions of books by which he had set great store. Gaston Leroux. Alright, so I have no idea how that turned out. I won't until I listen to the recording, and it could be absolutely awful. I have no idea, but I'm gonna post it anyway because, it can't be a whole lot worse than some of the weird stuff people are calling ASMR that's out there. I love you guys. Make sure to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description. Also, the link to my merch shop is in the description, and there are all kinds of deals going on all the time, so be sure to check it out. Anyway, let me know if you want me to continue this as a series. I can continue to read the book. I wouldn't mind that at all. I love this story, obviously. So, if you hated this, I'm sorry. This was just something that I thought would be hilarious, to be honest. Just remember that I will be fucking up many of the foreign words in this book. I tried. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you didn't, again, I'm sorry. Stay fantastic with the pH.
And keep your hand at the level of your eye.